Marcus Cole hit the water like a bullet. The cold crushed his chest, stole his breath, and tried to kill him before he even reached the girl. She was 14 years old, drowning, screaming, and she had no idea that the man fighting the current to save her life was a broke, starving, single black father who couldn't even afford to feed his own daughter dinner tonight. He didn't know whose daughter she was either. 3 weeks later, 200 Hell's Angels showed up at his door, and Marcus Cole's life was never the same again. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Subscribe now. You don't want to miss what happens next. Marcus Cole's alarm went off at 4:15 in the morning, and for a moment, he didn't move. He lay on the floor of his apartment, staring at the ceiling in the dark, listening to his daughter breathe. Amara was 6 years old. She slept on the only bed in the apartment, curled around a stuffed rabbit she'd named Biscuit. The rabbit had been white once. Now it was gray, and one of its ears was held on with safety pins. Amara didn't care. She held that rabbit like it was the last good thing in the world. And some nights, Marcus thought maybe it was. He sat up slowly because his back was killing him. 34 years old, and his back felt like 60. That's what sleeping on a folded blanket on a hardwood floor for 2 years does to a man. He rolled his neck, felt something pop, and reached for his phone. No messages. No missed calls. That was normal. Marcus Cole didn't have anyone to call him. He stood up and walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed in the dark. He opened it, and the light hit his face. Tired eyes, a jaw that hadn't relaxed in years, and the kind of quiet tension that lives in a man who's always calculating, always counting, always running the numbers in his head and coming up short. Half a gallon of milk, 4 eggs, a pack of bologna that was 2 days past its date but still smelled fine. Bread, peanut butter, Amara's juice boxes, the cheap ones from the dollar store. Great flavor, because grape was her favorite, and Marcus would walk through fire for grape juice boxes. He closed the fridge without taking anything for himself. Marcus hadn't eaten dinner last night. He'd made Amara mac and cheese from a box, cut up an apple on the side because Elena always said fruit with every meal, and sat across from his daughter at their tiny table, pretending he'd already eaten at work. "Daddy, you're not hungry?" Amara had asked, her eyes big and brown and so much like her mother's that it physically hurt. "I ate a big lunch, baby girl. You finish yours." She'd believed him because she was 6, and she trusted her father completely. And that trust was the most terrifying thing Marcus carried. More terrifying than the bills. More terrifying than the eviction notice he'd hidden in his coat pocket. More terrifying than the fact that he had $43.18 in his bank account, and rent was due in 11 days. Now, in the dark kitchen, Marcus drank a glass of water and called it breakfast. He got dressed quietly. Same khaki pants he wore every shift. Same gray t-shirt under the same dark blue work shirt with Jefferson Memorial Hospital stitched on the chest. He owned 2 of these shirts. He washed them by hand in the bathtub every other night and hung them over the shower rod to dry, because the laundromat cost $4.50 a load, and that was a gallon of milk. Before he left, Marcus knelt beside the bed. Amara was still sleeping, her breath slow and even, one small hand resting on Biscuit's patched ear. He leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. "I love you," he whispered. "I'll be back before you wake up." He said this every morning, every single morning. Because his mother had left one day without saying anything and never came back, and Marcus had sworn on Elena's grave, that his daughter would never, ever wake up wondering where her father was. He locked the door behind him and walked down 3 flights of stairs. The building smelled like mildew and old cooking oil. The hallway light on the 2nd floor had been broken for 6 months, Marcus had reported it 4 times. Nobody came. Outside, the street was empty. 4:35 a.m. The walk to Jefferson Memorial was 3 miles. Marcus used to take the bus, but a monthly pass was $65, and $65 was Amara's shoes. So he walked, rain or shine, summer or winter. 3 miles there, 3 miles back. 6 miles a day on feet that ached in boots with worn-out soles. He walked fast because the neighborhood wasn't great at 4 a.m., and because a black man walking alone in the dark has to be aware of everything. Every car that slows down, every shadow that moves, every siren in the distance. Marcus had never been in trouble in his life. Not once. No record, no arrests, no drugs, no alcohol. He'd seen what all of that did to the men around him growing up, and he'd chosen differently. But choosing differently didn't make the world see him differently, and Marcus knew that. He arrived at the hospital at 5:20, clocked in, grabbed his cart, started his shift. Marcus Cole was a janitor. He mopped floors, he cleaned toilets, he emptied trash cans filled with things that would make most people gag. He sanitized rooms after patients died in them. He scrubbed blood off walls and vomit off floors, and he did it all without complaint, because this job paid $14.50 an hour and gave him health insurance for Amara, and that was worth more than pride. The nurses knew him by name. "Morning, Marcus." "Hey, Marcus, how's that little girl of yours?" He always smiled, always answered. "She's great, growing like a weed. Thanks for asking." What he didn't say, "She's great, but I can't afford her school field trip next month. She's great, but her shoes are a half size too small, and she hasn't said anything because she doesn't want to worry me. She's great, but last night she asked me when we're going to visit Mommy's grave, and I can't afford the bus fare to the cemetery across town." Marcus kept all of that locked behind his smile. He'd learned a long time ago that the world doesn't want to hear a black man's problems. The world wants him to be strong and silent and grateful for whatever scraps fall off the table. So Marcus was strong and silent and grateful. His shift ended at 1 p.m. He clocked out, walked 3 miles home, changed his shirt, and made Amara lunch. On Saturdays, he worked the dinner shift at Rosie's Diner as a line cook. $11 an hour, no benefits, cash under the table. The owner, Rosie Chen, was a 60-year-old Taiwanese woman who pretended to be mean, but always sent Marcus home with leftovers for Amara. "You too skinny," Rosie would say, pushing a takeout container into his hands. "Eat something. You look like a ghost." "Ghosts are white, Rosie." "Smart mouth. Take the food. Get out of my kitchen." Marcus would take the food. He'd eat some of it on the walk home. The rest went to Amara for tomorrow. This was his life. 2 jobs, 6 miles of walking a day, skipping meals, counting pennies, hiding bills, sleeping on the floor so his daughter could have the bed. Every single day, the same brutal math. Rent, groceries, electricity, Amara's school supplies, Amara's medicine when she got sick, Amara's everything. And every single day, the math didn't work. The eviction notice had come on a Tuesday. Marcus had opened the envelope standing in the hallway, read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his coat pocket. $2,400 behind. 30 days to pay or vacate. $2,400. He might as well have owed $24 million. That night, after Amara fell asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a piece of paper and tried to figure it out. He wrote down every dollar he'd make in the next 30 days. He subtracted food, electricity, and the minimum payments he was already behind on. The number at the bottom of the page was negative. He stared at that number for a long time. Then he put the pen down, put his head in his hands, and sat in the dark, breathing. He didn't cry. Marcus Cole hadn't cried since Elena's funeral. Crying was a luxury, like sleep, like food, like hope. He couldn't afford any of it. What he could afford was to keep going. So that's what he did. The next morning, Wednesday, Marcus walked Amara to school. She held his hand and talked the entire way, the way 6-year-olds do, jumping from topic to topic like a bird hopping between branches. "Daddy, did you know butterflies taste with their feet?" "I did not know that." "Miss Patterson told us. And Daddy, Jalen said his dad has a motorcycle, and it goes vroom, and it's so loud. And I told him my daddy doesn't need a motorcycle, because my daddy's the strongest man in the whole world." Marcus looked down at his daughter. She was beaming up at him with absolute certainty in her eyes. The strongest man in the whole world. "Is that right?" he said. "That's right, because you carry the groceries all by yourself. Even the big bags." Marcus laughed. It came out rough because he hadn't laughed in a while, but it was real. "Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence, baby girl." "What's confidence?" "It means you believe in me." "I do believe in you, Daddy. I believe in you so much." She said it simply, the way children say enormous things without understanding their weight. Marcus squeezed her hand and kept walking, because if he stopped, he might break. And he couldn't break. Not here. Not in front of her. Not ever. At the school gate, he knelt down and zipped her jacket all the way up. "You have a good day, okay? Learn something amazing." "I will. Daddy?" "Yeah, baby?" "Can we go to the park on Saturday? The one by the bridge, where Mommy used to take us?" Marcus hesitated. The park by the old mill bridge. Elena's favorite spot. They used to go there every weekend as a family. Marcus, Elena, and Amara in her stroller. Elena would sit on the bench by the water and read while Marcus pushed Amara on the swings. After Elena died, Marcus couldn't go back. The memories were too sharp, too heavy. But Amara was looking at him with those eyes, and Marcus Cole would walk through fire for those eyes. "Sure, baby girl. Saturday. It's a date." Amara grinned, hugged him tight around the neck, and ran through the school gate without looking back. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the building, carrying the weight of the world and somehow still standing. At the hospital that day, something happened. Marcus was mopping the third-floor hallway near the oncology ward when he heard voices from an open room. A man's voice, angry and frustrated, and a woman's voice, calm and steady. "I'm telling you, the insurance won't cover it. We've got nothing left. Nothing." "We'll figure it out. We always do." "How? Tell me how, Karen, because I'm out of ideas." Marcus kept mopping. He didn't look into the room. He didn't need to. He knew that conversation. He'd lived that conversation. That was the sound of a man drowning on dry land, and Marcus knew exactly how cold that water was. He finished his shift, walked home, and found a note taped to his apartment door. It was from the landlord. Final reminder, 26 days remaining. Marcus pulled the note off the door, crumpled it, and threw it in the trash. Inside, Mrs. Okafor from next door was watching Amara. Mrs. Okafor was 72, Nigerian, and the closest thing to a grandmother Amara had ever known. She watched Amara for free because, as she told Marcus, "In my country, we don't charge family for love." "She was an angel," Mrs. Okafor said, gathering her things. "We made cookies. I saved you some." "Mrs. Okafor, I don't have to do anything. I want to. Eat the cookies, Marcus. You're disappearing." She patted his cheek and left. Marcus looked down at the plate of cookies on the counter. His stomach clenched with hunger. He ate two, wrapped the rest for Amara's lunchbox, and started making dinner. Thursday. Friday. The days blurred together. Wake up. Walk. Work. Walk. Work. Walk. Sleep on the floor. Repeat. Marcus moved through his life like a man wading through deep water, each step taking more effort than the last. On Friday night, after Amara was asleep, Marcus pulled out his notebook, the one where he kept track of everything. On the last page, he'd written a list under the heading Options. 1. Ask the church for help. Pride said no. Desperation said maybe. 2. Sell blood plasma. $50 per donation, twice a week. It was something. 3. Pick up a third job. When? He was already sleeping 4 hours a night. 4. Call Elena's sister in Baltimore. Elena's sister hadn't spoken to Marcus since the funeral. She'd made it clear she thought Elena had married beneath her. 5. Give up Amara. This was on the list only so Marcus could cross it out. He drew a line through it so hard the pen tore the paper. He stared at the list. None of these options solved the problem. All of them together didn't solve the problem. Marcus closed the notebook and put it away. Tomorrow was Saturday. He'd promised Amara the park. He'd keep that promise at least, even if he couldn't keep any of the others. Saturday morning came gray and cool. October in the northeast, the trees turning gold and red, the air carrying that crisp bite that says winter's coming and it doesn't care if you're ready. Marcus woke up stiff and sore, made Amara scrambled eggs and toast, and told her to get dressed. "The park, Daddy, the park!" She was bouncing, electric with excitement, already pulling on her jacket. "Easy, baby girl, shoes first." I know. Shoes, then jacket, then adventure." "Who told you that?" "Mommy. Mommy always said shoes, then jacket, then adventure." Marcus stopped. For just a second, the air went out of him. Then he smiled and tied his daughter's shoes, the ones that were a half size too small, and told himself he'd figure out new ones next week. They walked to the park. It was a 20-minute walk, and Amara talked the entire time. About her teacher, about a boy named Jalen who ate glue, about how she wanted to be a veterinarian and also a princess and also an astronaut. And could she be all three? You can be anything you want, Amara. Even a dinosaur? Especially a dinosaur. The park was quiet when they arrived. A few joggers on the trail, an old man feeding pigeons on a bench. The mill bridge stretched across the river, old and rusty, its wooden planks worn smooth by 100 years of footsteps. Marcus sat on a bench near the water. Amara ran straight for the swings. "Push me, Daddy! Push me high!" He pushed her, high, higher, until she was shrieking with laughter and kicking her legs at the sky. For 10 minutes, Marcus forgot about the bills, forgot about the eviction, forgot about everything except the sound of his daughter's joy, which was, he thought, the only truly beautiful sound left in the world. Eventually, Amara got tired of the swings and ran off to play on the climbing structure. Marcus sat back down on the bench and pulled out his notebook. Not the Bill's notebook, a different one. This one had Amara's school schedule, important phone numbers, and in the back, a letter he'd been writing to Elena. He wrote to her sometimes, not every day, just when things got heavy and he needed to talk to someone who'd understand. Elena, it's been 2 years and 3 months. Amara lost another tooth. She put it under her pillow and I almost forgot to swap it for a quarter. Almost. I didn't forget. I won't forget. I promise I won't forget the things that matter. I'm behind on rent again. I know what you'd say. You'd say, we'll figure it out. I'm trying. I'm trying so hard, baby. Some days I don't know if trying is enough." He stopped writing, closed the notebook. From across the park, he heard Amara. "Daddy, watch me! Watch me hang upside down!" "I see you, baby. Be careful." Marcus put the notebook away and watched his daughter hang from the monkey bars, her braids dangling, her face flushed with excitement. She was happy. Right now, in this moment, she was happy. And that had to be enough. An hour passed. The park got a little busier. A group of teenagers appeared on the mill bridge. 3 girls, maybe 14 or 15, laughing and taking photos with their phones. Marcus noticed them the way he noticed everything, automatically, without thinking. Survival habit. You learn to track movement when you grow up the way Marcus grew up. Amara ran over and climbed into his lap. "Daddy, I'm thirsty." "I brought water. Here." She drank from the bottle, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and leaned against his chest. "Daddy, I like this park." "Me too, baby." "Mommy liked it too." "She loved it." "I miss Mommy." "I miss her too." Amara was quiet for a moment. Then, "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Marcus looked down at her. 6 years old, and she was asking the question he asked himself every single night. Kids know. They always know. They feel the tension, the worry, the weight in the air, even when you think you're hiding it. "We're going to be okay, Amara. I promise." "You promise, promise?" "I promise, promise." She nodded, satisfied, and wriggled off his lap to go play again. Marcus watched her go and thought, "I will die before I break that promise. I will die before I let her down." He didn't know it yet, but the universe was about to test that vow in the most literal way possible. It was 3:47 p.m. when Marcus heard the scream. Not a playful scream, not a laughing scream. A scream that split the afternoon in half and turned his blood to ice. A sound that every parent recognizes on instinct. The sound of a child in mortal danger. Marcus's head snapped toward the bridge. One of the teenage girls was in the water. She'd gone over the railing. The river had her. And the river was swimming. The girl's head broke the surface, her mouth open, gasping, arms thrashing. The current was fast, swollen from a week of rain, brown and angry and pulling her downstream like she weighed nothing. Her friends were screaming from the bridge, frozen, useless. Marcus was on his feet before his brain caught up to his body. He looked at Amara. She was on the climbing structure, 30 yards away, staring at the bridge with wide eyes. "Amara, stay right there! Don't move! Do you hear me?" "Daddy, don't move!" Then Marcus Cole ran toward the river, and everything changed. Marcus hit the riverbank at a full sprint. His boots dug into the mud. His eyes locked on the girl in the water. She was maybe 40 yards downstream from the bridge, and moving fast, the current dragging her like a rag doll. Her head went under, came back up, went under again. Each time she surfaced, her mouth opened in a silent scream that the water swallowed whole. Marcus didn't slow down. He didn't think about the cold. He didn't think about the fact that he hadn't eaten since yesterday's 2 cookies. He didn't think about Amara standing alone on the climbing structure behind him, watching her father run toward the thing that might kill him. He thought about one thing. That girl is going to die if nobody moves right now. Nobody was moving. The girls on the bridge were crying and screaming into their phones. A jogger on the trail had stopped to stare with his mouth open. The old man on the bench was struggling to his feet, too slow, too far away. Marcus kicked off his boots at the water's edge. His hands went to his belt. He yanked it free and wrapped one end around his right fist, a reflex from a community swimming lesson he'd taken as a teenager at the YMCA. The instructor had said, If you ever have to save someone in open water, give them something to grab. A drowning person will climb you like a ladder and take you both down. He remembered that. 14 years later, standing on a muddy riverbank in October, he remembered. Then he jumped. The cold was beyond anything Marcus had ever felt. It wasn't cold, it was violence. The water hit him like a wall of concrete, and every muscle in his body seized at once. His lungs locked. His heart stuttered. For one terrible second, Marcus couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then training kicked in. Not formal training, survival training. The kind you get from a life that never stops hitting you. Marcus forced his arms to move, forced his legs to kick. The current grabbed him and pulled him downstream, which was exactly where he needed to go, because the girl was downstream, and the river was doing half the work. He could see her. 20 yards, 15. Her jacket was bright pink, ballooned with trapped air, keeping her partially afloat, but not enough. Her arms were slapping the water in wild, uncoordinated panic. She was drowning the way people actually drown. Not like in the movies, with dramatic thrashing, but with a terrible, quiet efficiency. The water was simply taking her. "Hold on!" Marcus shouted. Water filled his mouth. He spat it out and kept swimming. "I'm coming! Hold on!" 10 yards. 5. The girl's eyes found him. Wide, terrified. The eyes of a child who knows she's dying. Marcus reached her, and the girl did exactly what the YMCA instructor had warned about. She grabbed him, both hands on his shoulders, fingers digging in like claws, and she climbed. Her weight shoved Marcus under. Water closed over his head. Dark. Cold. The girl's legs kicked against his chest, pushing him deeper. Marcus didn't fight her. He let himself sink, let her push off him, and then he came up behind her and wrapped his left arm across her chest from behind, pinning her arms. Rescue hold. The one thing he remembered. "Stop fighting!" he shouted in her ear. "I've got you. Stop fighting me." I can't. She was choking, gagging, her body convulsing with panic. "I've got you. You hear me? I've got you. You're not going to die today." Something in his voice reached her. Maybe it was the certainty. Maybe it was the authority. Maybe it was the fact that Marcus Cole spoke to her the same way he spoke to Amara during thunderstorms. Calm, steady, absolute. The girl stopped thrashing. Her body went limp against his chest, shaking violently, but no longer fighting. Marcus kicked for the bank, one arm around the girl, one arm pulling through the water, his legs burning, his clothes dragging him down like hands pulling from below. The current fought him every inch. His shoulder hit something hard, a submerged rock, jagged and solid, and the impact sent a bolt of white-hot pain through his left arm. Marcus heard something pop, felt something shift. His left shoulder had just dislocated. He knew it instantly, because the pain was so specific, so wrong, that his vision went white. He didn't let go. The girl was dead weight against his chest now. Exhausted, half-conscious. If Marcus let go, she'd go under in 2 seconds, and she wouldn't come back up. He kicked with everything he had. One arm, dislocated shoulders screaming, legs going numb. The bank was right there, 10 feet away. But 10 feet in that current might as well have been a mile. Marcus's vision was darkening at the edges. Black spots. The cold was winning. His body was shutting down. Amara. The name cut through the fog like a blade. Amara was standing alone in that park, watching. If Marcus died in this river, his 6-year-old daughter would watch it happen. She'd be alone. No mother, no father, no one. Marcus kicked so hard he felt something tear in his right leg. He didn't care. He kicked again. Again. His foot scraped bottom. Mud. Solid ground. He planted his feet and dragged the girl through the shallows, one agonizing step at a time, until the water was at his waist, his knees, his ankles. He collapsed on the bank with the girl on top of him. They lay there in the mud, both coughing, both shaking, both alive. Marcus rolled onto his side and vomited river water. His left arm hung at a wrong angle, the shoulder clearly displaced. The pain was enormous, a living thing that pulsed with every heartbeat. He coughed again, tasted blood, and forced himself to sit up. The girl was on her hands and knees beside him, retching and crying. Her blonde hair was plastered to her face. Her pink jacket was torn. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering loud enough to hear. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked. His voice came out raw, scraped, barely human. "Hey, look at me. Are you hurt?" The girl looked up at him. Tears and river water streaked her face. She shook her head. "Good. You're okay. You're gonna be okay." "I can't swim," she said, and her voice broke on the last word. "I told them I can't swim, and they dared me to lean over, and I fell. Hey, you're out. You're safe. Breathe for me, all right? Just breathe." She nodded and tried to breathe, and mostly just sobbed, which was fine. Sobbing meant breathing. Sobbing meant alive. Marcus heard footsteps. The jogger reached them first, his face white with shock. "I called 911. Is she? Oh my God." "She needs a blanket," Marcus said. "Something warm, right now." The jogger pulled off his own sweatshirt and draped it around the girl's shoulders. Marcus nodded. His vision was still doing that thing where the edges went dark and came back, dark and came back. His shoulder was on fire. His right leg throbbed where he'd felt it tear. Then he remembered. Amara. Marcus lurched to his feet. The world tilted sideways. He grabbed the jogger's arm to keep from falling. "My daughter. She's at the playground. She's alone." "I'll get her," the jogger said. "Sit down, man. You're bleeding." "She's 6. She's wearing a yellow jacket. Her name is Amara. Tell her Daddy sent you. Tell her Daddy's okay." The jogger took off running toward the playground. Marcus watched him go, swaying on his feet, holding his dislocated arm against his body. Every instinct screamed at him to go to Amara himself, but his legs weren't cooperating, and the girl on the ground was still crying, and the sirens were getting closer. And Marcus Cole did what he always did. He stayed where he was needed. He knelt beside the girl, put his good hand on her back. "Help's coming. You hear those sirens? That's for you. You're going to be fine." "You saved me," she whispered. You jumped in." "Yeah, well, seemed like the thing to do." Your arm is..." "Don't worry about my arm." The paramedics arrived 90 seconds later. 2 trucks. They swarmed the girl first, which made sense. She was a child. She'd nearly drowned. She was in shock. They wrapped her in thermal blankets, checked her vitals, started asking her questions. Marcus sat in the mud 5 feet away and watched, holding his dead arm and trying not to pass out. The jogger came back with Amara. She was running, her yellow jacket flapping, her face twisted with fear. When she saw Marcus, she screamed, "Daddy!" She hit him like a small missile, wrapping her arms around his waist, and Marcus gasped because she'd grabbed his bad side and the pain was beyond words. But he didn't push her away. He held her with his one good arm and pressed his face into her hair and breathed. "I'm okay, baby. Daddy's okay." "You were in the water, Daddy. You were in the water and you went under and I saw and I thought..." She was crying so hard she couldn't finish. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here." A paramedic finally came over. Young guy, maybe 25, with a kind face and quick hands.
He took one look at Marcus's shoulder and winced. "Sir, that's dislocated. We need to get you to the ER." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've got a grade 2 separation at minimum, possible torn rotator cuff, and you're coughing blood. You need imaging." "How much?" Marcus asked. The paramedic blinked. "How much?" "The ER. How much is it going to cost?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone with insurance meets someone without it. The paramedic's face changed. Not pity exactly, but something close to it. "Sir, we can worry about that later." "No, we can't. I'm asking you a real question. How much?" "Without insurance, the ER visit alone could be $800 to $2,000. With imaging, maybe more." Marcus shook his head. "I can't." "Sir, I said I can't. Check me out here. Tell me what I need to do at home." The paramedic looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's face stopped him. Maybe it was the jaw. Maybe it was the eyes. Maybe it was the quiet, iron determination of a man who has done the math and knows what he can't afford. The paramedic cleaned Marcus's cuts, fashioned a sling from a triangular bandage, and gave him instructions for managing the shoulder. "You need to get this relocated within the next few hours. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. And if you start coughing up more blood, you call 911 immediately. That's not a suggestion." "Understood." "Do you have someone who can help with the shoulder?" "I'll handle it." The paramedic handed him 2 instant cold packs and a pamphlet about post-immersion syndrome that Marcus would never read. Then the young man dropped his voice. "For what it's worth, what you did was the bravest thing I've seen in 3 years on this job. That girl would be dead right now." Marcus looked over at the girl on the gurney. She was wrapped in blankets, an oxygen mask on her face, a paramedic holding her hand. She turned her head, and their eyes met. Even through the mask, he could see her mouth the words, "Thank you." Marcus nodded. "Daddy, can we go home?" Amara's voice was small and scared, and it cut through everything. "Yeah, baby, we're going home." Marcus stood up. It took him 2 tries. He held Amara's hand with his good arm and started walking. His boots were somewhere on the riverbank. He didn't go back for them. He walked home barefoot, 3 miles, in wet clothes, with a dislocated shoulder and a 6-year-old daughter who wouldn't let go of his hand. They walked in silence for the first mile. Then Amara spoke. "Daddy, why did you jump in the water?" Marcus thought about it. "Because she needed help." "But it was scary." "It was." "Were you scared?" "Yeah, baby. I was real scared." "Then why did you do it?" Marcus looked down at his daughter. "Because being scared isn't a reason not to help somebody. Being scared just means you know it matters." Amara processed this with the serious intensity of a 6-year-old philosopher. Then she squeezed his hand tighter and said, "Mommy would be proud of you." Marcus couldn't speak for the next 3 blocks. At home, he locked the door, ran a warm bath for Amara, and got her cleaned up and into pajamas. She was exhausted. The fear and the cold and the crying had drained her. She fell asleep on the bed, clutching biscuit, before 6 p.m., still wearing the worried expression that no 6-year-old should have to wear. Then Marcus went to the bathroom, closed the door, and dealt with his shoulder. He'd watched a video once, one of those emergency field medicine videos that exist on the internet for people who can't afford doctors. The technique was simple in theory, brutal in practice. Marcus sat on the bathroom floor, wedged his left wrist in the gap between the door and the frame, and slowly, steadily, rotated his body away. The sound his shoulder made when it relocated was something he'd hear in his nightmares for years.
The pain was so intense that his vision went completely black, and he bit through his bottom lip to keep from screaming and waking Amara. He tasted blood. He saw stars. He sat on that bathroom floor, shaking and sweating for 15 minutes before he could stand. He looked at himself in the mirror. What he saw was a man at the end of his rope. Hollow cheeks, bloodshot eyes, a split lip bleeding freely, a shoulder already swelling and purple. Scratches from the rocks, the beginnings of a bruise across his ribs where the girl's elbow had connected. He looked like he'd lost a fight, and, in a way, he had. He'd fought the river, and technically won. But the river had taken things from him he couldn't afford to lose. His shoulder meant he couldn't mop floors at the hospital. You can't push a mop with one arm. He called his supervisor that night. "Jerry, it's Marcus. I had an accident. I can't work my shift tomorrow." "What kind of accident?" "Pulled someone out of the river. Messed up my shoulder." "Jesus, Marcus, you okay?" "I'll live. I just need a few days." "How many days?" "Maybe a week?" The silence on the other end told Marcus everything. Jerry was a decent man, but the hospital was a machine, and machines don't wait for broken parts. They replace them. "I'll see what I can do," Jerry said. "But, Marcus, I've got to be straight with you. We're already short-staffed. If you miss more than 3 shifts, I have to report it. HR's been cracking down." "I understand." "I'm sorry, man. I really am." "I know. Thanks, Jerry." He hung up and did the math. 3 missed shifts. That was roughly $350 he wouldn't earn. Plus the Saturday diner shift he'd have to miss. Another $88. Total loss. Roughly $440. Added to the $2,400 he already owed in back rent. Added to the electric bill. Added to Amara's field trip money. Added to the new shoes she needed. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, his shoulder throbbing, his lip swollen, his body aching in places he didn't know could ache, and he wrote the number down. $3,127. That's what he was in the hole. That's what stood between him and the street, between Amara and a foster home, between his daughter and becoming another statistic in a system that chewed up black children and spit them out. Marcus stared at the number. Then he closed the notebook, put it in the drawer, went to the bedroom, lowered himself onto his blanket on the floor, very slowly, because every movement sent lightning through his shoulder. He lay in the dark and listened to Amara breathe. "Elena," he whispered to the ceiling, "I don't know how much longer I can do this." The ceiling didn't answer. It never did. But Amara rolled over in her sleep, and her small hand dangled off the edge of the bed, hanging in the air above him. Marcus reached up with his good hand and held it. Her fingers curled around his automatically. Even in sleep, she held on. Marcus held on too. The next 6 days were the hardest of Marcus Cole's life, and Marcus Cole had lived a hard life. He couldn't work. His shoulder wouldn't let him. He could barely lift his arm above his waist, and even basic tasks like opening jars or carrying grocery bags sent shockwaves of pain through his chest. He called Rosie at the diner. "Rosie, I can't make my shift Saturday." "What happened?" "Hurt my shoulder." "How?" "Long story." "You in trouble, Marcus?" He paused. Rosie had a way of asking questions that made lying feel impossible. "I'm managing." "That means yes. Come by the diner when you can. I'll have food." "Rosie, don't argue with me. You never win." She hung up. Mrs. Okafor noticed the sling immediately. She showed up at his door with a pot of pepper soup so spicy it made Marcus's eyes water, and she watched him eat it with a kind of firm love that doesn't accept refusal. "Who did this to you?" she asked, her eyes sharp. "The river." "The river." She said it flatly,
like the river had personally offended her. "And why were you fighting a river?" "A girl fell in. I pulled her out." Mrs. Okafor studied him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "You are just like your wife, always saving everyone but yourself." That one landed. Marcus looked away. "I will watch Amara this week," Mrs. Okafor said. It wasn't an offer. It was a declaration. "You rest, you heal, and you eat the soup. All of it." "Yes, ma'am." She left, and Marcus ate the soup, and it burned all the way down, and he was grateful for the burn because it meant he could still feel something. By Thursday, Marcus could move his arm again. Not well, not without pain, but enough to hold a mop, and that was all that mattered. He went back to work on Friday, 6 days after the river, and pushed through his shift on grit and ibuprofen. Jerry didn't say anything about the missed shifts, just nodded and said, "Glad you're back." But the damage was done. 6 days without income. The landlord's deadline was 14 days away. Marcus had $43.18 in his bank account and a number in his notebook that read $3,127. He was drowning again, just slower this time. And there was nobody jumping in to save him. On Saturday morning, Marcus dragged himself out of bed before dawn, dropped Amara at Mrs. Okafor's, and walked to the diner. His shoulder ached with every step. The October wind cut through his jacket, the same jacket he'd worn into the river, now stiff and smelling faintly of mud, no matter how many times he washed it. Rosie took one look at him when he walked through the kitchen door and pointed at a stool. "Sit, eat, then work." "Rosie, I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like death warmed over. Sit." She put a plate in front of him. Eggs, bacon, rice, and the Taiwanese sausage she made from her grandmother's recipe. Marcus ate every bite. It was the first real meal he'd had in 3 days. "Thank you," he said quietly. Rosie waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "Don't thank me. Cook the orders. Table 6 has been waiting." Marcus cooked. His shoulder screamed. He cooked anyway. 8 hours on his feet, one arm doing most of the work, sweat running down his back, jaw clenched so tight his teeth hurt. At the end of the shift, Rosie pressed $88 and a takeout container into his hands. "Same time next week," she said. "And, Marcus." "Yeah?" "Whatever's eating you, don't let it win. You too stubborn to lose." He walked home in the dark, picked up Amara, made her dinner, read her a story, tucked her in, held her hand until she fell asleep. Then he sat at the kitchen table and opened the eviction notice one more time. 14 days had become 8. 8 days to find $2,400 that didn't exist. 8 days before his daughter lost the only home she'd ever known. Marcus put his head on the table and closed his eyes. Not sleeping, just resting, just breathing, just holding on for one more night, because that's all he knew how to do. He didn't know that 200 miles away, in a converted warehouse that smelled like engine oil and leather, a woman named Celeste was showing her mother's motorcycle club a photograph of a man in a muddy sling, carrying a barefoot 6-year-old girl through the streets. The photograph had been taken by one of the paramedics. It had made its way to local news, and from local news, it had made its way to a table where 50 of the toughest men and women in 3 states sat in absolute silence, staring at the image of a man who had nothing and gave everything. Crusher put down his beer. "Find him," he said. "Find out who he is. Find out what he needs." And just like that, without Marcus Cole knowing it, the wheels began to turn. 8 days turned into 7. 7 turned into 6. Marcus worked every shift the hospital would give him and picked up an extra Saturday at the diner. He sold his watch,
Elena's anniversary gift to him, at a pawn shop for $40, and felt a piece of his soul tear loose when he handed it across the counter. He sold blood plasma twice, sitting in a clinic chair with a needle in his arm, watching his blood flow into a bag, while other men in the same chairs stared at the same ceiling with the same hollow expression. $50 a session, $100 total. Added to his savings, added to his wages, added to the watch money, he had $731. He needed $2,400. The math didn't work. The math never worked. Marcus sat at his kitchen table on a Wednesday night with the numbers in front of him and knew, with the cold certainty of a man who's been fighting gravity his whole life, that he was going to lose the apartment. He was going to lose Amara's home. He was going to fail the only person he'd ever sworn not to fail. He called the landlord the next morning. Gerald Whitfield, 63 years old, owned 4 buildings in the neighborhood. Not cruel exactly, but not kind either. Business was business. "Mr. Whitfield, this is Marcus Cole in 3B. "I know who you are, Marcus. The answer hasn't changed." "I have $700. I can get you that today. The rest, I just need more time. Another 30 days. "You said that 60 days ago. I know I did. But I had an accident. I couldn't work for a week. And, Marcus..." Whitfield's voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "I've got a mortgage on that building. I've got property taxes due in December. I've got 3 other tenants who pay on time. I can't keep carrying you." "I understand that, sir. I'm asking for 30 days. That's all." "You've got 6. That's all I can give you. I'm sorry." The line went dead. Marcus put the phone down and stared at it. 6 days. 6 days to find $1,700 that might as well have been $1,700,000. He went to work. He mopped floors. He emptied trash. He cleaned a room where an elderly woman had died during the night, and the family was still in the hallway crying. Marcus cleaned around the grief with the careful efficiency of a man who understands loss. And when the family's son stopped him in the hall and said, "Thank you for being gentle with her room," Marcus just nodded, because his throat was too tight to speak. On Thursday, something arrived at his apartment. A bag of groceries sitting outside his door when he came home. No note, no name, just food. Good food. Chicken, rice, vegetables, milk, bread, peanut butter, and grape juice boxes for Amara. Marcus stood in the hallway holding the bag and looked both ways down the corridor. Nobody there. He asked Mrs. Okafor. "Wasn't me," she said. "But God provides, Marcus. Don't question it." He didn't question it. He put the food away and made Amara the best dinner she'd had in weeks. She ate 2 helpings and smiled with grape juice on her upper lip. And Marcus took a photograph with his mind because he knew, somehow, that the days of this apartment were numbered, and he wanted to remember her happy in it. Friday passed. Saturday. Marcus worked the diner shift, came home, put Amara to bed. 4 days left. He had $731 and no more blood to sell this week, and nothing left to pawn except the furniture that came with the apartment and wasn't his to sell. He opened the notebook, turned to the page where he'd written his list of options weeks ago. Every one of them was crossed out except the last one, the one he'd torn through with his pen. He stared at it. Not because he was considering it, never that, but because the fear of it was the only thing that still made him fight. He would not lose Amara. He would live in his car if he had to. He would sleep in a shelter. He would do whatever it took. But his daughter would stay with him. Marcus closed the notebook and whispered to the ceiling, "Elena, if you can hear me, I could really use a miracle right now." Sunday morning came gray and cold. November had arrived overnight, bringing a sharp wind that rattled the windows and crept through the cracks in the walls. Marcus woke on the floor, stiff, aching, his shoulder still tender. Amara was still asleep, curled around Biscuit, breathing softly. Marcus lay there for a moment, listening to the wind, and then he heard something else. A low rumble, distant but growing. Not thunder. The sky was overcast, but there was no storm. This sound was mechanical, rhythmic, building in volume like a wave rolling toward shore. Marcus frowned and sat up. The rumble grew louder. The floor vibrated. The windows hummed. Amara stirred. "Daddy, what's that noise?" "I don't know, baby. Stay in bed." Marcus went to the window and pulled back the curtain. What he saw made his heart stop. Motorcycles. Coming down the street in a formation that stretched back as far as he could see. Not 5, not 10, not 50. Hundreds. Chrome and black and leather and exhaust, filling the narrow street like a river of steel. The sound was deafening, a rolling thunder that shook the building and set off car alarms on the block. Marcus stepped back from the window. His first thought was trouble. His second thought was Amara. His third thought was the door. He moved fast, checked the lock, checked the deadbolt, pulled Amara out of bed and set her on his hip. She clung to his neck, eyes wide. "Daddy, what's happening?" "I don't know yet, but I'm right here. Nothing's going to happen to you." The engines cut off all at once. The silence that followed was almost worse, heavy and electric, the kind of silence that precedes something enormous. Then Marcus heard boots, many boots, coming up the stairs of his building. Second floor, third floor, coming toward his door. His body went rigid. Every survival instinct he'd ever developed, every lesson from every rough neighborhood, every late-night walk home past shadows that moved, all of it screamed at him to run. But there was nowhere to run. Third-floor apartment, one door, one window that opened onto a fire escape 3 stories up, a 6-year-old in his arms. The footsteps stopped outside his door. A knock. Not aggressive. Not the police knock he'd heard in other apartments over the years, the kind that sounds like a battering ram. This was firm, deliberate, patient. Marcus set Amara down. "Go to the bathroom, baby. Close the door." "Daddy." "Now, Amara, go." She went. He heard the bathroom door click shut. Marcus walked to the front door, his hands steady even though his heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. He opened the door. The hallway was full of people. Leather vests, tattoos, bandanas, patches he didn't recognize. Big men and women with hard faces and harder hands, filling the corridor from his door to the stairwell. In front of them all stood the biggest man Marcus had ever seen. 6.5 feet tall, shoulders like a refrigerator, a gray beard that reached his chest, and eyes that were surprisingly calm. Beside him stood a woman, blonde hair pulled back, leather vest, blue eyes that Marcus recognized, though he couldn't immediately place them. And beside the woman, half hidden behind her, a teenage girl in a pink jacket. Marcus knew that jacket. He'd held on to it in the river while the current tried to kill them both. The girl stepped forward. Her face broke into something between a smile and tears. "That's him, Mom. That's the man who saved me." Marcus felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Not literally, but the world tilted. The girl from the river was here, in his hallway, with 200 bikers. The woman, Celeste, looked at Marcus with an intensity that pinned him in place.
Marcus Cole?
"Yeah? I'm Celeste, Riley's mother, and I've spent the last 3 weeks looking for you." Marcus glanced at the army behind her. You brought a few friends. Celeste didn't smile. I brought my family. The big man stepped forward and extended a hand the size of a dinner plate. Name's Crusher, president of this chapter. You mind if we come in, or you want to do this in the hall? Marcus looked at the hand, looked at the hallway full of leather and chrome, looked at the girl whose life he'd saved 3 weeks ago. His mind was racing, calculating, trying to figure out the angle, because in Marcus Cole's life, nothing came free. Everything had a price. Everything had strings. Do what, exactly? Marcus asked. Crusher lowered his hands slowly, not offended, understanding. Fair question. Let me put it simple. 3 weeks ago, you jumped into a freezing river and saved this girl. You didn't know who she was. You didn't ask for anything. You had a daughter standing right there in that park, and you still jumped. Then you walked home barefoot with a dislocated shoulder because you couldn't afford the ambulance. Marcus's jaw tightened. How do you know all that? Because we looked. Because when one of ours almost dies and a stranger risks his life to save her, we find out who that stranger is. And what we found out about you, Marcus Cole, made every single person in this hallway get on their bike and ride. I don't want any trouble. Brother, Crusher's voice dropped. Do we look like trouble to you? Honestly? Yeah, a little bit. Something cracked in Crusher's face. It took Marcus a second to realize the man was smiling. Behind him, a few of the bikers laughed, low and warm. Fair enough, Crusher said. Let me tell you what we are. We're a family. Riley is Celeste's daughter. Celeste is my VP. That makes Riley family to every man and woman you see here. When you saved Riley, you saved one of ours. And in our world, that kind of debt doesn't go unpaid. I didn't do it for a debt. We know. That's why we're here. Marcus stood in his doorway, blocking the entrance, his body a wall between these strangers and his daughter hiding in the bathroom. Every instinct told him to close the door. Every instinct told him the people who show up in numbers want something. That help always comes with conditions. That a black man accepting favors from people he doesn't know is a black man setting himself up to owe. But Celeste stepped forward, and her eyes were wet. Mr. Cole, my daughter is alive because of you. She's alive because a man who couldn't afford an ambulance threw himself into a river without thinking twice. I know you don't trust this. I wouldn't either. But I need you to hear me. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a photograph. She held it up. It was the photo. Marcus in the mud, his arm in a makeshift sling, carrying Amara barefoot through the streets. He hadn't known anyone was watching. He hadn't known anyone cared. This picture has been on every table in every clubhouse across 3 states, Celeste said. Every single member has seen it, and every single one of them said the same thing. Find him. Help him. Because that man in the mud with his baby girl, that man is what courage looks like. Marcus stared at the photo. His throat closed. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 20 years of handling everything alone, of carrying every burden in silence, of never asking for help because help never came. And here was a woman holding a picture of his worst moment and calling it courage. Daddy? Marcus turned. Amara had opened the bathroom door. She stood in the hallway in her pajamas, clutching biscuit, staring at the crowd of strangers with enormous eyes. Every biker in the hallway went quiet. 200 of the toughest men and women in 3 states looked at a 6-year-old girl in pajamas and went absolutely silent. Crusher knelt down. This mountain of a man, this wall of muscle and leather and gray beard, lowered himself to one knee so he was eye level with Amara. His voice, when he spoke, was the gentlest sound Marcus had ever heard from a man that size. "Hey there, little one. What's your name?" Amara pressed closer to the doorframe. She looked up at Marcus. He nodded. "It's okay." "Amara," she said softly. "Amara. That's a beautiful name." "I'm Crusher." "That's a funny name." Another ripple of laughter through the hallway. Crusher grinned. "Yeah, I guess it is." "Amara, is it okay if we come in and talk to your daddy?" Amara looked at Marcus again. Her eyes were searching his face for the answer, the way she always did, because her father was the compass she oriented her entire world around. Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Crusher, then at Celeste, who was still holding the photograph with tears running down her face, then at Riley, who had both hands pressed over her mouth, crying silently. Marcus Cole had spent his entire life alone. Alone in foster care. Alone on the streets. Alone raising a daughter after the only woman who ever loved him died in a hospital bed. He was alone, and he was drowning, and he was 6 days from losing everything, and 200 strangers had just shown up at his door because he jumped into a river. "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and stepped aside. "Come in." They couldn't all fit, obviously. The apartment was barely big enough for Marcus and Amara. Crusher, Celeste, Riley, and 3 others came inside. The rest waited in the hall, on the stairs, in the street. Nightingale, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes, carried a folder. Doc, a man with graying temples who looked more like an accountant than a biker, carried a briefcase. Stitch, a young guy covered in tattoos, carried nothing but a grin. Marcus stood in his living room, which was also his bedroom, which was also his dining room, and watched these strangers take in the apartment. The blanket on the floor where he slept, the single bed, the bare walls, the kitchen table with one wobbly leg, the eviction notice on the counter that he'd forgotten to hide. Nightingale saw it. She picked it up, read it, and looked at Crusher. Something passed between them, a conversation without words. Marcus felt his face burn. Shame. The particular, specific shame of poverty being witnessed, of having your struggle laid bare for strangers to evaluate. "Don't," he said. His voice was harder than he intended. "Whatever you're thinking, don't." Crusher raised both hands. "Nobody's judging you, Marcus. Nobody in this room has any right to judge anybody. I pay my way. I work 2 jobs. I take care of my daughter. We know. I'm behind because I got hurt, because I couldn't work, because I jumped into a river, and because you saved my daughter," Celeste finished. "Because you sacrificed your own body, your income, and your stability to save a girl you'd never met. And the system punished you for it. You lost a week of work. You couldn't afford medical care. You're about to lose your home. All because you did the right thing." Marcus opened his mouth and closed it. Nobody had ever laid it out like that before. Nobody had ever connected the dots so plainly. He'd been so busy surviving that he'd never stopped to see the injustice of it. He'd saved a life, and the reward was losing his own. Amara tugged on his hand. "Daddy, are these your friends?" Marcus looked down at her, then at the room full of bikers. "I don't know yet, baby girl." Crusher pulled a chair from the kitchen table, turned it around, and sat on it backward, his massive arms resting on the back. "Let me tell you what we want to do, Marcus. Then you can decide if we're friends." "Go ahead." "First, the rent. How much do you owe?" "That's not how much." Marcus set his jaw. $2,400. Crusher nodded like the number was nothing. "Done." "No." "Marcus, I said no. I don't take handouts." The room went still. Amara looked between her father and the big man, sensing the tension. Crusher leaned forward. "You hear that?" He pointed toward the hallway, where the muffled sounds of 200 people waiting could be heard through the door. Every person out there? Half of them grew up just like you. Foster care, streets, broken system. The other half have been broke, been homeless, been one paycheck from losing it all. Nobody in this club looks down on a man who's struggling. We look down on a man who won't help when he can. Marcus didn't answer. This isn't charity, Crusher said. This is a debt. You gave us something we can never repay. You gave us Riley. We owe you, and we pay our debts.
Doc opened his briefcase. I'm a lawyer. Yes, I know. He smiled at Marcus's expression. Not what you expected. I've been looking into your situation. Your foster family abandoned you at 17. That's a federal violation. The state owes you back support, transitional housing funds, and educational benefits that were never dispersed. We're talking about $15,000 to $20,000. Marcus blinked. What? You were failed by the system, Marcus. Multiple times. Legally, you have standing to recover those funds. I'll file the paperwork this week. No charge. Nightingale opened her folder. I spent 20 years as a social worker. I know every program in this state. You qualify for emergency housing assistance, child care subsidies, and a utility relief program that would cut your electric bill in half. I've already started the applications. I just need your signature. Stitch spoke up. I run a construction crew. We need reliable guys. 22 an hour, full benefits, consistent schedule, Monday through Friday. I can start you next week. Marcus looked at him. 22 an hour? With benefits, health, dental, vision, for you and Amara. I don't know construction. I'll teach you. You jumped into a freezing river with a dislocated shoulder and saved a kid. I think you can learn to swing a hammer. Celeste reached into her pocket. She pulled out a bank card and set it on the kitchen table. There's $8,000 in this account. Before you say no, listen to me. You couldn't afford the ambulance. You popped your own shoulder back in because you couldn't afford the emergency room. You went back to work in 6 days because you couldn't afford not to. You almost died saving my daughter, Marcus. $8,000 doesn't come close to covering that debt, but it's a start. Marcus stared at the card on the table. $8,000. He could pay the rent, buy Amara new shoes, fix his shoulder properly, eat 3 meals a day. $8,000 was more money than he'd seen in one place in his entire life. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs to make them stop. Why? His voice came out barely above a whisper. You don't know me. None of you know me. Crusher stood up. The chair scraped the floor. He walked over to Marcus and stood in front of him. And up close, the big man's eyes were not hard at all. They were the eyes of a man who had lived a rough life and come out the other side with a clear understanding of what mattered. You're wrong, Crusher said. We do know you. We know you because we've been you. Broke, alone, fighting a world that doesn't see you. And we know that when a man like you, a man with nothing, jumps into a river to save a stranger's child, that's not luck. That's character. That's the kind of man we want in our corner. He put his hand on Marcus's shoulder, the good one. You're not alone anymore, Marcus. You don't have to carry this by yourself. Let us help. Not because you're weak, because you're strong enough to deserve it. Marcus Cole looked at this man, this stranger in leather and patches who spoke with the certainty of family. He looked at Celeste, crying quietly, at Riley, holding her mother's hand, at Nightingale, Doc, Stitch, all of them watching him, waiting. Then he looked at Amara. She was standing beside him, one hand gripping his pants leg, biscuit dangling from the other. She looked up at him with those eyes, Elena's eyes, and said the thing that broke him. Daddy,
It's okay to let them help. Mommy would say it's okay.
Marcus dropped to his knees, right there in the middle of his tiny apartment with 6 strangers watching. He dropped to his knees and pulled his daughter into his chest and held her so tight she squeaked. And he cried. For the first time since Elena's funeral, Marcus Cole cried. Not quiet tears, not controlled, dignified tears. These were the tears of a man who'd been holding a dam together with his bare hands for 2 years and just felt it give way. He cried for Elena. He cried for Amara. He cried for every meal he'd skipped and every night on the floor and every time he'd told his daughter everything was fine when nothing was fine. He cried for the boy in foster care who nobody came back for. He cried for the man in the river who almost died. He cried because 200 strangers had driven from 3 states away to tell him he mattered, and he hadn't heard those words since Elena was alive. Amara wrapped her small arms around his neck.
It's okay, Daddy. It's okay. I've got you.
She said it the way he always said it to her, and Marcus held on. Nobody in the room spoke. Nobody moved. They let him have this moment because every person in that room understood that some things can't be rushed. Grief. Relief. The terrifying, overwhelming experience of being seen. When Marcus finally looked up, his face wet, his eyes red, Crusher was still standing there. The big man's eyes were bright.
So,
Crusher said quietly.
We good?
Marcus wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked at the bank card on the table, at the folder of paperwork, at the phone number of a man offering him a real job with real benefits. He looked at his daughter, who was smiling at him, with grape juice still stained on the corner of her mouth from yesterday. Yeah, Marcus said. We're good. Crusher nodded once, turned to the door, opened it, and called down the hallway. Bring it up. And that's when the real chaos began. Bikers poured through the door like a river that couldn't be stopped. They came in pairs and threes, carrying boxes, bags, furniture, and things Marcus couldn't even identify. The hallway became a conveyor belt of bodies and cargo. Men twice Marcus's size moved through his tiny apartment with surprising care, stepping around Amara like she was made of glass, nodding to Marcus as they passed. Where you want this bed frame, brother? Marcus stared at the man holding a queen-sized headboard. I don't... What? Bed frame. Where you want it? I have a bed. The biker looked at the twin mattress where Amara slept, then at the folded blanket on the floor. His jaw worked for a second. Now you have 2. Where you want it? Marcus pointed to the corner, and the man moved. Another biker came through, carrying a small bed with guardrails, pink and white, sized for a child. Behind him, a woman with tattoo sleeves carried bedding, a comforter with little stars on it, sheets, pillows. She stopped in front of Amara and knelt down. Hey, sweetheart. I'm Mama Jean. You like stars? Amara nodded, her eyes enormous. Good, because this bed is covered in them, and it's all yours. Amara looked at Marcus. He couldn't speak, so he just nodded. Amara turned back to Mama Jean and whispered, Can Biscuit sleep in it too? Mama Jean looked at the battered stuffed rabbit. Something moved across her face, quick and deep, and then she smiled. Biscuit gets the best pillow. The apartment transformed in hours. Marcus stood in the middle of it, holding Amara on his hip, turning in slow circles as his home became unrecognizable. A kitchen table that didn't wobble. 4 chairs. A couch, used but solid, that smelled like leather cleaner. A bookshelf someone had built by hand, the wood still smelling like sawdust. Pots and pans, dishes, towels, a microwave, a coffee maker, the fridge. 2 bikers spent 20 minutes loading the fridge.
Not gas station groceries, not dollar store survival food. Real food. Chicken breasts, ground beef, vegetables, fruit, milk, eggs, rice, bread, and grape juice boxes. Cases of them. More grape juice than Amara could drink in 6 months.
Who told you about the grape juice? Marcus asked Celeste, who was directing traffic in the kitchen. Riley. She asked Amara what her favorite thing was while you were talking to Crusher. Amara said grape juice and biscuit. Marcus looked at Riley, who was sitting on the new couch with Amara, showing her something on her phone. The girl who'd nearly drowned was laughing, alive, her arm around his daughter like they'd known each other forever. She's a good kid, Marcus said. She's alive because of you. Celeste's voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. Everything she'll ever do, every birthday, every graduation, every stupid teenage mistake, that's because of you. You don't owe me for that. I know I don't owe you. I want to. There's a difference. A biker appeared in the doorway, holding a toolbox. Yo, Celeste, that light in the hallway on the 2nd floor is busted. Want me to fix it? Celeste looked at Marcus. He almost laughed. It's been broken for 6 months. I reported it 4 times. Fix it, Celeste said. The biker disappeared. 20 minutes later, the 2nd floor hallway light worked for the first time since March. Nightingale found Marcus in the kitchen, where he was trying to put groceries away and failing because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. She didn't comment on the shaking. She just pulled out a chair, sat down, and opened her folder. I need 30 minutes of your time, Marcus. I know this is overwhelming, but some of this is time-sensitive. Okay? First, Emergency Housing Assistance. This program covers up to 3 months of back rent for families with children. You qualify. I filled out everything except your signature and your landlord's information. Gerald Whitfield. He owns the building. I know. I called him this morning. Marcus blinked. You called my landlord? I called your landlord and explained that a housing assistance check would be arriving within 10 business days to cover your arrears. I also explained that his tenant is a single father who nearly died saving a child's life and lost income as a result. Mr. Whitfield was receptive. What does that mean? Nightingale allowed herself a small smile. It means he agreed to waive the late fees and extend your payment deadline by 60 days. It also means he's fixing the hot water heater in the basement that's been running at half capacity since August. Marcus sat down. His legs had made the decision for him. How did you know about the hot water heater? I asked Mrs. Okafor. Lovely woman. She had quite a lot to say about the building's maintenance. And about you. What did she say about me? That you're the best man she's ever known, and that if we hurt you, she'd curse us with something from the old country that would make our hair fall out. Nightingale said this completely straight-faced. I believe her. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. Nightingale walked him through the paperwork. Housing assistance. Child care subsidies that would cover after-school care for Amara. A utility relief program. SNAP benefits he'd never applied for because he didn't know he qualified. Health insurance through the state that would cover both him and Amara. Real insurance, not the bare-bones hospital plan that covered his shifts and nothing else. Why didn't anyone tell me about these programs? Marcus asked, and the frustration in his voice surprised even him. I've been drowning for 2 years. I went to the county office 3 times. They gave me forms I couldn't understand and told me to come back. Nightingale put down her pen. Because the system isn't designed to help you, Marcus. It's designed to process you. There's a difference. The people at the county office aren't bad people. They're overworked, underfunded, and buried in paperwork. They don't have time to sit with a single father
and walk him through every program he qualifies for. That's what I did for 20 years before I retired. And I'm telling you, for every family I helped, there were 10 I couldn't reach. That's broken. Yes, it is. Marcus signed the papers, every page, his hands still shaking, his signature uneven. But he signed because his daughter needed new shoes, and he was tired of being proud and hungry at the same time. Doc came in next. He sat where Nightingale had been, opened his briefcase, and laid out a different kind of paperwork. 2 things, Marcus. First, the foster care situation. I filed a preliminary inquiry with the state. Your foster family relocated without notifying the court and without arranging continued placement. That's abandonment. The state is liable for failure to supervise. Conservatively, you're owed between $15,000 and $20,000 in back support and transitional benefits. How long does that take? 6 months to a year, maybe faster if they want to avoid the publicity.
A story like yours, black teenager abandoned by the foster system, now a struggling single father. That's not a headline any state agency wants. I don't want publicity. You don't have to. The threat of it is enough. Doc made a note. Second thing, emancipation records. When you turned 18, the court should have issued you a full set of documents. Birth certificate, social security card, any records from your time in care. Did you receive those? No. That's what I thought. I'm going to get them. All of them. You need them for employment, for Amara's school records, for everything. I'll have them within 2 weeks. What do I owe you for this? Doc looked at him over his reading glasses. You pulled my niece out of a river, Marcus. Riley's your niece too? Everyone's my niece. Everyone's my nephew. That's how this works. Riley is family. You saved family. Now you're family. And family doesn't bill family. Marcus leaned back in his chair. The word family kept coming up over and over, spoken by people who had no obligation to say it. People who wore leather vests and rode motorcycles and looked like the kind of people the world told Marcus to be afraid of. And yet, here they were, in his kitchen, rebuilding his life with paperwork and groceries and a bed with stars on it for his daughter. Stitch caught Marcus in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room. The young biker was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, grimming. So, Monday. What about Monday? You start. Construction sites on Elm Street, the new housing development. 7 a.m. I'll pick you up. I haven't said yes yet. You haven't said no either. 22 an hour, Marcus. Benefits kick in after 30 days. Health, dental, vision. Amara gets covered too. Marcus rubbed his face. I don't know the first thing about construction. You know how to show up. You know how to work hard. You know how to not quit when things get rough. Everything else, I'll teach you. Stitch uncrossed his arms. Look, man, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is temporary. You're thinking we'll forget about you in a month. You're thinking nobody does this for free. Am I wrong? Yeah, you are. I've been with this club for 6 years. I came in with nothing, literally nothing. Sleeping in my car, 2 felonies on my record, couldn't get hired at a gas station. Crusher gave me a chance, taught me the trade. Now I run a crew, own a truck, and I'm putting my little sister through nursing school. Stitch held Marcus's gaze. Nobody in this club is self-made, brother. Every one of us was built by the people who showed up for us. Now we're showing up for you. That's it. That's the whole thing. Marcus nodded slowly. Monday, 7 a.m. I'll be outside at 6:30. Don't make me honk. By late afternoon, the apartment was done. Marcus walked through it like a man walking through a dream. The bedroom had a real bed, with a real mattress and sheets that smelled like detergent. Amara's corner had her star bed, a small dresser, and a lamp shaped like a moon that Mama Jean had produced from somewhere. The closet held clothes, not just Marcus's 2 hospital shirts and his diner pants. Real clothes, jeans that fit, work boots, steel-toed, for the construction job, T-shirts, a winter coat, heavy and warm, with a tag that said it was rated to 20 below. And for Amara, a whole wardrobe, dresses, pants, shirts, a jacket, and shoes. New shoes, the right size. Marcus held the shoes in his hands for a long time. They were small and purple, with little flowers on the side. And they were the exact right size, because somebody had asked Amara what size she wore. His daughter would not go to school tomorrow with her toes crammed into shoes a half size too small. She would put on purple shoes that fit, and she would run, and she wouldn't hurt. He held those shoes and pressed them against his chest and breathed. A knock on the door. Marcus wiped his eyes and opened it. Crusher stood there alone, the hallway behind him empty for the first time all day. The big man looked tired. Good tired. The kind of tired that comes from doing something that matters. "How you doing, Marcus?" "I don't have words." "You don't need words. You need sleep. Real sleep. In a real bed. When's the last time you slept in a bed?" 2 years. Crusher's eyes closed for a second. Just a second. When they opened, they were bright. "Not tonight. Tonight you sleep in a bed. You hear me?" "I hear you." Crusher reached into his vest and pulled out a piece of paper. "My number. Top of the list. Any time, day or night. If something breaks, if someone gives you trouble, if you need anything, you call." "Why are you doing all this?" Marcus asked. Not with suspicion this time, with genuine need to understand. "You don't know me. 3 weeks ago, you didn't know I existed." Crusher leaned against the door frame. "You ever been in a foxhole, Marcus?" "No." "I have. 2 tours, Iraq. And I'll tell you something about foxholes. You don't care what a man looks like. You don't care where he came from. You don't care about his bank account or his address or any of that noise. You care about one thing. When the bullets start flying, does he stay or does he run?" Crusher pointed at Marcus. "You stayed. When that water was pulling you under and your shoulder was wrecked and your daughter was watching and every reason in the world said don't, you stayed. That's the only resume I need." Marcus couldn't respond. His throat had closed completely. "One more thing," Crusher said. He pulled a motorcycle magnet from his pocket. Chrome. The club's logo. He held it out. "You're not a member. I'm not asking you to ride. But this goes on your fridge. It means you're under our protection. Anyone messes with you, they mess with us. Anyone messes with Amara, they answer to 200 people who don't mess around." Marcus took the magnet. It was heavy in his palm. Solid. Real. "Thank you," he said, and the words were completely inadequate, but they were all he had. Crusher nodded, squeezed Marcus's good shoulder, and walked away. His boots echoed down the stairwell, and then the front door of the building opened and closed, and then an engine started, and then another, and then 100 more, and the street filled with the sound of thunder rolling away. Marcus closed his apartment door and stood in the silence. Amara was sitting on her new star bed, bouncing gently, testing the mattress with the scientific seriousness of a 6-year-old. Biscuit was propped on the pillow. The moon lamp glowed soft yellow. "Daddy, this bed is so bouncy." "Is it?" "It's the bounciest bed in the whole world." She bounced again to prove it. "Daddy?" "Yeah, baby." "Are those people really your friends now?"
Marcus walked over and sat on the edge of her bed. The mattress was firm and clean, and it smelled like nothing, which was somehow the best smell in the world. Yeah, Amara, I think they are. The big man is funny. He said I can call him Uncle Crush. Uncle Crush. And the girl, Riley, she said she's going to teach me how to braid friendship bracelets. And Mama Jean said she'll watch me on Saturdays so you don't have to worry. And the lady with the silver hair said I can have all the juice boxes I want. Amara counted these treasures on her fingers like they were jewels. Then she looked up. Daddy, why are you crying again? I'm not crying. You are. Your eyes are wet. That's just allergies. You don't have allergies, Daddy. I do now. Amara crawled into his lap. She cupped his face in her small hands, the way Elena used to, and looked at him with those impossible eyes.
It's okay to be happy, Daddy. Mommy would want you to be happy. Marcus pulled her close. He held her in the apartment that no longer felt like a prison, surrounded by things given by people who expected nothing in return. And he let himself feel something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Not relief, not gratitude. Those were there. But underneath them, deeper, quieter, was something else. Hope. The actual physical sensation of hope. In his chest. Like a muscle he'd forgotten he had, suddenly flexing. I am happy, baby girl. Good. Can I have a juice box? You can have 2. 3! Don't push it. She squealed and ran to the fridge. Marcus watched her go. She pulled open the door and the light hit her face, and she stood there, staring at the full shelves like she'd opened a treasure chest. Her mouth dropped open. Daddy, there's so much food. I know. There's grapes, real grapes, and chicken, and... Daddy, is that ice cream? I don't know. Is it? It's chocolate. She spun around, her eyes blazing. Daddy, we have chocolate ice cream. Then I guess we're having chocolate ice cream for dessert. Amara pulled the ice cream out like it was the Holy Grail. Marcus got 2 bowls, 2 spoons, and they sat at the new kitchen table that didn't wobble, and they ate chocolate ice cream at 5 p.m. on a Sunday, because nobody was there to tell them they couldn't. Amara ate her ice cream and talked about Riley and Uncle Crush and the star bed and the purple shoes and the moon lamp and every single thing that had happened today, because 6-year-olds process miracles through narration. She talked, and Marcus listened and ate his ice cream and let the warmth of the apartment and the sugar and the sound of his daughter's voice fill the spaces that had been empty for so long. After dinner, after a bath, after pajamas and teeth brushing, and 2 stories and a negotiation for a 3rd story that Marcus lost because Amara's negotiation skills were terrifying, Marcus tucked his daughter into her star bed. He pulled the comforter up to her chin. Biscuit was wedged in the crook of her arm. Good night, baby girl. Good night, Daddy. I love you. I love you more. Impossible. She smiled and closed her eyes. Marcus watched her for a moment, then turned on the moon lamp, turned off the overhead light, and walked to his own bed. His own bed. He stood beside it and pressed his hand into the mattress. Firm, clean, real. He pulled back the covers, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. He thought about Elena, about what she'd say if she could see this. She'd probably laugh and cry at the same time, the way she did at Amara's birth. She'd say something like, "See, I told you the world had good people in it." And Marcus would say, "You were right." And she'd say, "I'm always right." And he'd say, "I know." He smiled in the dark. On the fridge, held up by the chrome motorcycle magnet, was the eviction notice. Marcus had put it there on purpose. Not as a reminder of the fear, but as a marker
a before and after line. On one side of that paper was the man who had nothing. On the other side was the man who had everything that mattered. Marcus Cole closed his eyes and slept. 8 hours, straight through. No nightmares, no waking up cold, no calculations running through his head. Just sleep, deep and warm and safe. In a bed, in a home, in a life that had been handed back to him by 200 strangers in leather who refused to let a good man fall. When his alarm went off at 6 the next morning, he didn't hit snooze. He got up, showered with hot water that actually stayed hot, dressed in clothes that fit, and made Amara scrambled eggs and toast. When she came to the table in her new purple shoes, she did a little spin.
"Do they fit?" Marcus asked.
"They fit perfect, Daddy." "Good. Now eat your eggs." At 6:30, a horn honked outside. Marcus looked out the window. Stitch's truck idled at the curb. The young biker waved from the driver's seat. Marcus kissed Amara goodbye, dropped her at Mrs. Okafor's, and walked downstairs. He opened the truck door and climbed in. "Morning," Stitch said. "Ready?" Marcus looked at him, looked at the construction site address on the dashboard, looked at his own hands, calloused and scarred and steady. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I'm ready." Stitch grinned, put the truck in gear, and pulled away from the curb. The sun was just coming up, pale gold over the rooftops, and Marcus Cole rode toward the first day of his new life, with the window cracked and the cold November air on his face, and something in his chest that felt, for the first time in 2 years, like tomorrow was worth waking up for. The construction site on Elm Street became Marcus Cole's classroom. He showed up at 7 every morning, steel-toed boots laced tight, and he learned. Stitch taught him how to read blueprints, how to frame a wall, how to measure twice and cut once. The other crew members, rough men with rough hands and easy laughs, tested him the way working men test every new guy. They gave him the worst jobs first: digging trenches, hauling lumber, mixing concrete until his arms burned and his back screamed. Marcus didn't complain, not once. The men noticed. "Hey, new guy," a heavyset carpenter named Eddie called out during Marcus's second week. "You ever get tired?" "Every day." "You ever quit?" "Not yet." Eddie nodded slowly, the way men nod when they've decided something about another man. "Good answer." By the 3rd week, Marcus could frame a wall on his own. By the 6th week, Stitch moved him off grunt work and onto the framing crew full-time. The pay stayed at $22 an hour, but the work was steadier, and the crew treated him like one of their own. His first full paycheck was $1,760 before taxes. Marcus stared at the number on the direct deposit notification for a long time. He'd never earned that much in 2 weeks in his life. His hospital janitor job had paid roughly the same amount in a month, and even then, half of it vanished before he could blink. He called Rosie that evening. "Rosie, it's Marcus." "I know who it is. Nobody else calls me at dinner time. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I need to talk to you about the diner." Silence. Then, "You're quitting." "I got a full-time job, construction, benefits. I can't work Saturdays anymore." More silence. Marcus braced himself. Rosie had kept him alive with those Saturday shifts and those takeout containers. Leaving felt like betrayal. "Marcus," Rosie's voice was thick, "you listen to me. You worked in my kitchen for 2 years. You never called in sick. You never showed up late. You never complained, not even when I yelled at you, which I did too much. You are the best worker I've ever had, and I'm going to miss you. And if you ever tell anyone I said that, I'll deny it." "Rosie, shut up. I'm not done.
You come by the diner every Sunday with that little girl. I'll feed you both. Free. Don't argue. Rosie, I can pay now. I said don't argue. Sunday. Both of you. That's final." She hung up. Marcus put the phone down and smiled. Actually smiled, with his whole face, the way he used to smile when Elena was alive. The weeks turned into months, and Marcus's life rebuilt itself the way a house goes up on a good foundation, one beam at a time, steady and sure. The housing assistance came through. The back rent was paid. Gerald Whitfield, the landlord, showed up personally to replace the hot water heater and fix 3 other things that had been broken for months. He shook Marcus's hand in the hallway and said, "I should have done this sooner. I'm sorry." Marcus accepted the apology because holding grudges cost energy he couldn't afford to waste. Doc's legal work moved fast. The state settled the foster care claim in 4 months, not the 6 to 12 Doc had predicted. $15,000, deposited directly into an account Doc helped Marcus set up. Marcus didn't touch it. Every dollar went into a savings account for Amara. College fund. He wrote the words on the account paperwork, and his hand shook when he did it, because he was a man who'd never gone to college, writing a check for his daughter's future. And the weight of that was almost too much. "You could use some of this for yourself," Doc said. "Nobody would blame you." "It's not for me. It's for her." Doc studied him over his glasses. "You know, Marcus, taking care of yourself is taking care of her. She needs her father healthy and whole, not just working." "I know." "Do you? Because I see you pushing. I see you working 60 hours a week, volunteering on weekends, running yourself down. That shoulder still bothers you." "Don't think I haven't noticed." Marcus rotated his left shoulder involuntarily. It was better. The state health insurance had gotten him to a real doctor, finally, 3 months after the river. Physical therapy, twice a week. The doctor said he'd done more damage popping it back himself than the river had done dislocating it. But with therapy, he'd get 80% mobility back. 80% was enough. Marcus had operated on less. "I'm fine, Doc." "You're stubborn." "Same thing." Doc shook his head, but he was smiling. "You remind me of Crusher when he was younger. Same jaw, same refusal to admit he's human." The club didn't disappear. That was the thing Marcus kept waiting for. The moment when the phone calls stopped, when the visits dried up, when the promises faded the way promises always faded in his experience. It didn't happen. Every 2 weeks, somebody from the club knocked on his door. Sometimes it was Crusher, massive and quiet, checking in with a six-pack and a willingness to sit in silence if that's what Marcus needed. Sometimes it was Mama Jean, who had become Amara's Saturday person, watching her while Marcus worked overtime, teaching her to bake cookies and braid hair and do all the things a little girl deserves to learn from a woman with patient hands. Sometimes it was Celeste. Celeste came by on a Tuesday evening in February, 4 months after the river. Marcus was making dinner. Amara was at the kitchen table doing homework, her tongue poking out the way it did when she concentrated. Celeste knocked twice, and Marcus opened the door, and she stood there holding a casserole dish and looking like she had something to say. "Come in," Marcus said. "I brought food. Riley made it. She's learning to cook." "Riley made a casserole?" "Don't look so nervous. I supervised." Celeste set the dish on the counter. "It's chicken and rice. Worst case, it's edible. Best case, she'll be thrilled you ate it." "Auntie C!" Amara launched herself off the chair and into Celeste's arms. This had become her name for Celeste, bestowed one Saturday at Mama Jean's, when Amara decided that anyone who brought grape juice was automatically an aunt. Celeste held her tight, closed her eyes for a second, and Marcus saw it again, that flash of emotion Celeste kept locked down in public but couldn't fully hide. Every time she hugged Amara, she was thinking about Riley, about the river, About the phone call she almost got instead of the one she did. The call that would have started with, "Ma'am, I'm sorry," and ended with a world that had no Riley in it. "How's school, baby?" Celeste asked. "Good. I got a star on my spelling test. And Jalen ate glue. Again." "Again?" "He likes the taste. I told him it's not food, but he doesn't listen." Celeste laughed and set Amara down. Amara went back to her homework. Celeste turned to Marcus, and her face shifted. "Can we talk?" They stepped into the hallway. Celeste leaned against the wall and crossed her arms, and Marcus recognized the posture. She was working up to something. "What is it?" "The club voted last week. Unanimous." Celeste paused. "We want to sponsor Amara's education. All of it. Elementary through high school. Private if you want. Whatever gives her the best shot. And when she's ready for college, we cover tuition." Marcus didn't move, didn't breathe. "This isn't the emergency fund," Celeste continued. "This is separate. The club set up a trust. Doc structured it. It's legally sound. The money is there, regardless of what happens to the club, to me, to anyone. It's Amara's, period." "How much?" "Enough. Don't worry about the number. Worry about picking a good school." Marcus leaned against the opposite wall. The hallway was narrow and quiet, and he could hear Amara inside the apartment, humming to herself while she did her homework. And the sound was so normal, so peaceful, that it made everything Celeste was saying feel like it was happening in another universe. "You know what Elena would say right now?" Marcus said. "What?" "She'd say, 'See, Marcus, I told you. The world is full of good people. You just have to let them in.'" "Smart woman." "Smartest person I ever knew. She married me, so that's debatable. But in general, yeah." Celeste smiled. It was the first time Marcus had seen her fully smile. Not the controlled VP smile she wore at club events, but a real one that reached her eyes and made her look 10 years younger. "She'd be proud of you, Marcus. What you're building for Amara, how you've handled all of this. She'd be proud." "I hope so." "I know so, because I'm a mother. And if something happened to me, and a man raised Riley the way you're raising Amara, I'd be proud of him too." They stood in the hallway for a moment, two parents bound together by a river and a choice, and the kind of gratitude that doesn't have a bottom. "Thank you," Marcus said, "for everything. Not just the money or the apartment or the job. For seeing me, for seeing Amara, for not driving past." "You jumped into a river, Marcus. We didn't drive past because you didn't walk past." Spring came. Marcus's shoulder healed to the point where he could lift lumber over his head and only feel a dull ache instead of lightning. Stitch promoted him to assistant crew lead, which came with a raise. 26 an hour. Marcus did the math on his lunch break and realized, for the first time in his adult life, that his monthly income exceeded his monthly expenses. There was money left over. Not a fortune, not even a lot, but something, a margin, a cushion between him and the edge. He took Amara to buy new shoes, even though the purple ones still fit. She picked red ones this time. He didn't check the price tag. He signed up for night classes at the community college. 2 courses, business management and accounting. Stitch had mentioned, casually, over lunch one day, that the construction company needed a site manager and that the owner preferred to promote from within. "You'd need some education," Stitch said. "Business stuff, management. But you've got the work ethic and the crew respects you. I'm just saying, think about it." Marcus thought about it. Then he enrolled. Tuesday and Thursday nights, 7 to 9 p.m. Mrs. Okafor watched Amara. When Marcus offered to pay her, she threatened him with the pepper soup spoon. "You insult me," she said. "That child is my granddaughter in every way that matters. You don't pay family to love family." There it was again, that word,
family.
Spoken by a 72-year-old Nigerian woman who had no biological connection to Marcus or Amara, but who had loved them both fiercely and without condition since the day they moved in. Marcus had spent his whole life believing family was something you were born into, something assigned by blood or law, something he'd been denied by a system that shuffled him from home to home like a piece of unwanted furniture. Now he understood that family was something you built, something you earned, something that showed up at your door on a Sunday morning with 200 motorcycles and said, "You're not alone anymore." Amara turned 7 in April. Marcus planned a small party. Cake, juice boxes, a few kids from her class. What he got was something else entirely. Crusher called the week before. "What's the plan for the kid's birthday?" "Just a small thing at the apartment, nothing big." "Define small." "Cake, a few friends, maybe a piñata?" "A piñata!" Crusher said the word like it was a foreign concept. "Marcus, we're throwing this party." Crusher. "Clubhouse, Saturday, noon. Mama Jean's already making the cake. 3 layers. Don't argue with Mama Jean. Nobody wins." "I can handle a birthday party." "I know you can. But you don't have to. That's the point." The party was unlike anything Amara had ever experienced. The clubhouse was transformed. Balloons, streamers, a banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Amara," in letters 3 feet tall. Mama Jean's cake was a masterpiece. Chocolate with purple frosting, because Amara had entered a purple phase. There were kids everywhere. Amara's school friends mixed with club members' children and grandchildren. Riley was there, now 15, and treating Amara like a little sister, braiding her hair and teaching her a dance from some video Marcus didn't understand. Bikers in leather vests served cake to 7-year-olds. Crusher ran the grill, flipping burgers with a spatula that looked like a toy in his massive hand. Doc organized a relay race. Stitch set up a bouncy castle he'd rented, and when Marcus asked how much it cost, Stitch said, "Brother, if you ask me about money one more time, I'm putting you back on trench duty." Marcus stood in the middle of it all, holding a paper plate with a burger and watching his daughter run through a crowd of people who loved her. She was laughing, that big, open, full-body laugh that children have before the world teaches them to be careful with their joy. Her braids flew behind her. Her new red shoes flashed in the sunlight. She was happy. Not surviving happy. Not making the best of it happy. Actually, truly, completely happy. Celeste appeared at his elbow. "She's something else, Marcus." "She's everything." "You did that. You made her who she is." "I had help. A lot of help." "You had help because you earned it. Don't forget that part." Marcus watched Amara tackle Riley in a hug that nearly knocked the teenager over. "Can I ask you something, Celeste?" "Anything." "That day at the river, if it had been somebody else who pulled Riley out, somebody with money, a house, a normal life, would you have done all this? The club, the apartment, the job, all of it?" Celeste was quiet for a long moment. "Probably. We'd have said thank you. We'd have been grateful. But would we have shown up with 200 bikes and rebuilt their entire life?" She shook her head. "No, probably not." "So it was because I had nothing." "It was because you had nothing, and you still jumped. That's the difference, Marcus. Anybody can be brave when they've got a safety net. You were brave with nothing under you but air. That's not just courage. That's character. And character is the only currency that matters in our world." Marcus thought about that for a long time. Summer came hot and heavy. Marcus finished his first semester of night classes with a 3.6 GPA.
The construction company owner, a quiet man named Patterson, who rarely visited the sites, showed up one afternoon and shook Marcus's hand. "Stitch says you're the best worker he's ever hired." "Stitch exaggerates." "Stitch doesn't exaggerate. He also says you're taking management courses." "Yes, sir. We've got a site manager position opening in September. I'd like you to apply." Marcus looked at Stitch, who was standing behind Patterson, trying very hard not to grin. "I've only been here 8 months." "And in 8 months, you've learned what most guys take 3 years to figure out. Apply, Marcus. I don't make suggestions I don't mean." Marcus applied. He got the job. Site manager. $31 an hour. Full benefits. A company truck. Marcus Cole, who 8 months ago was sleeping on a floor and mopping hospital hallways, was managing a construction crew and driving a truck with his name on the clipboard. The first time he pulled into the school parking lot in that truck to pick up Amara, she came running out of the building so fast her backpack was bouncing. "Daddy, is that your truck?" "It's the company truck, baby." "But you drive it?" "I drive it." "Can I honk the horn?" "Get in." She honked the horn 7 times. Marcus let her. Fall arrived, and Marcus made a decision. He'd been thinking about it for weeks, turning it over in his mind late at night, testing it from every angle. On a Sunday in October, exactly 1 year after the river, he drove to the park by the old mill bridge. He hadn't been back since the day he jumped. He'd avoided it, the same way he avoided thinking about the cold and the dark and the feeling of the girl going limp in his arms. But today, he needed to be here. Today was the anniversary, and Marcus Cole was not a man who ran from the things that scared him. Amara was with Mama Jean. He came alone. He parked the truck and walked to the bench by the water. The same bench. The same river, calm now, low from a dry autumn, looking nothing like the monster that had tried to kill him a year ago. He sat down and pulled out the notebook, the old one, with Elena's letter in the back. He opened to a fresh page and wrote, "Elena, it's been 1 year since the river. Amara is 7. She's smart and brave and funny and kind. And she has your eyes and your laugh and your stubbornness. She's doing great in school. She has friends. She has family. Real family. People who showed up and stayed. She has purple shoes and red shoes and a bed with stars on it and chocolate ice cream whenever she wants. I'm okay too. I have a job I'm proud of. I'm going to school. I sleep in a bed. I eat 3 meals a day. I'm not scared anymore, Elena. Not the way I was. I'm still scared of failing, Amara. I think I'll always be scared of that. But I'm not scared of tomorrow. I used to be terrified of tomorrow. Now I wake up and I think, okay, let's see what today brings. That's a miracle. That's a real miracle. You were right about people. You were always right. The world is hard and broken and unfair, but it's also full of people who will jump in for you if you jump in for them. I jumped in a river, and 200 strangers caught me. You would have loved them, Elena. You would have loved Crusher and Celeste and Mama Jean and Rosie and Mrs. Okafor and Stitch and Doc and all of them. You would have said, "See, Marcus, I told you." And I would have said, "You were right." And you would have said, "I'm always right." And I would have said, "I know. I love you. I miss you every day. But I'm not drowning anymore. I'm swimming. And I'm taking our girl somewhere beautiful." He closed the notebook, sat for a while, watched the river move. Then he got up, walked back to the truck, and drove to pick up his daughter. That evening, the club held a gathering at the clubhouse. Not a party exactly, something quieter. A dinner. Crusher had called it a family meal, and every member within driving distance had come. The long tables were full. Food was everywhere. Kids ran between the bikes. Music played. And at the head of the table, Crusher stood up and raised his glass. 1 year ago today, Crusher said, and the room went silent. A man with nothing jumped into a river to save a girl he'd never met. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know what it would cost him. He just jumped. Because that's what good men do. He looked at Marcus, who was sitting between Amara and Celeste, his hands wrapped around a glass of sweet tea, his jaw tight. Marcus Cole, you saved Riley's life. That's a fact. But you also did something else. You reminded every person in this room what courage looks like. Not the kind with guns and glory.
The real kind. The kind where a man who can't afford his own dinner throws his body into freezing water for a stranger. The kind where a father who's been sleeping on a floor for 2 years never once lets his daughter see him break. Crusher's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and kept going. We found you under a storm, brother. Broke. Alone. Holding it together with nothing but grit and love. And what you taught us is that grit and love is enough. It's always been enough. Everything else, the money, the apartment, the job, that's just the world catching up to what you already were. He raised his glass higher. To Marcus Cole, the man who jumped. 200 voices answered. To Marcus. Marcus didn't stand. He couldn't. His legs wouldn't cooperate, and his eyes wouldn't clear, and his throat had closed around something too big to swallow. Amara tugged his sleeve. Daddy, they're talking about you. I know, baby. Are you doing your allergies again? Yeah, allergies. You should see a doctor about that. Celeste laughed beside him. Riley, sitting across the table, was crying and laughing at the same time. Mama Jean was dabbing her eyes with a napkin. Stitch was grinning. Doc was nodding. Mrs. Okafor, who had come as Marcus's guest and was sitting between 2 enormous bikers who were both slightly terrified of her, said loudly, That's my boy. I told you, that's my boy. Marcus looked around the table. Every face, every one, people who had no reason to care about him and chose to anyway. People who had ridden hundreds of miles to knock on a stranger's door because they believe that a man who jumps for others deserves someone to jump for him. He found his voice. It came out rough and low and not entirely steady, but it came. I spent my whole life thinking I was alone, that nobody was coming, that the only person who would ever fight for me was me. He paused. Then I met you people, and you showed me something I didn't know was possible. You showed me that the world can surprise you, that strangers can become family, that one moment, one choice, one jump can change everything. He looked at Amara. She was watching him with Elena's eyes, and in those eyes he saw the future. Not a future of fear and hunger and floor sleeping and eviction notices. A future of purple shoes and star beds and college funds and chocolate ice cream. A future built by hands that weren't his own, but held him up all the same. I jumped because I couldn't watch a kid drown, Marcus said. That's all it was. I didn't think about it. I just moved. But you all jumped too. You jumped for me, for Amara, for a man you'd never met. And that... He stopped, breathed. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. Braver than anything I did in that river. He raised his glass. To family, the kind you're born with, and the kind that shows up on motorcycles. The room erupted. Glasses raised. Cheers. Crushers laugh like rolling thunder. Amara clapping because everyone else was clapping. Riley reaching across the table to squeeze Marcus's hand. Celeste putting her arm around his shoulders, brief and firm, the way a sister would. Later that night, Marcus carried a sleeping Amara to the truck.
She was out cold, her face pressed against his neck, biscuit dangling from one hand. He buckled her into her car seat and stood there for a moment in the parking lot, breathing the cool October air. Crusher walked over. The big man was quiet, his hands in his vest pockets, his gray beard silver in the moonlight. "You good, brother?" "I'm good." "You need anything?" "No, I've got everything I need." Crusher nodded. Then he did something he'd never done before. He pulled Marcus into a hug. A real one. The kind of hug that men give each other when words aren't enough, and pretending otherwise is a waste of time. Marcus hugged him back. Two men in a parking lot. One massive and leather-clad. One lean and still learning how to accept love. Holding on because that's what family does. "You're a good man, Marcus Cole," Crusher said into his shoulder. "Don't you ever forget that." "I won't." "And bring that girl by more often. She's the only person in this whole club who isn't scared of me." "That's because she hasn't seen you eat. It's terrifying." Crusher laughed, slapped Marcus on the back hard enough to stagger him, and walked away. Marcus got in the truck. Amara was asleep in the back. Biscuit had fallen to the floorboard. Marcus picked up the rabbit, tucked it back into Amara's arms, and started the engine. He drove through the dark streets, past the hospital where he used to mop floors, past Rosie's diner where the lights were still on, past the old apartment building where Gerald Whitfield had finally fixed everything that was broken. He drove past the park by the mill bridge and didn't flinch. He drove past the overpass where the highway crossed the river, and for just a second he looked at the water below, black and quiet in the night. 1 year ago, that river had tried to take everything from him. Instead, it had given him everything. Marcus Cole drove home. He carried his daughter upstairs. He tucked her into her star bed, with Biscuit and the purple comforter, and the moon lamp glowing soft yellow. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you. I'll be here when you wake up." Then he went to his own bed, in his own home, in a life he'd built with his own hands and the hands of 200 people who refused to let him fall. He closed his eyes. He was no longer drowning. He was no longer sinking. He was no longer the man on the floor, counting pennies in the dark, praying for a miracle he didn't believe in. Marcus Cole was flying, lifted by the current that once tried to kill him, carried by a family forged in freezing water, held aloft by the simple, unshakable truth that one act of courage, one single jump, had changed everything. And in the next room, his daughter slept with a smile on her face, wearing tomorrow like it was the most natural thing in the world, because her father had made sure it was.